Welcome to Monday through Friday, Cellular Agriculture for a Pandemic-Free Future. My name is George Ortega. This is episode number 23. It is Thursday, August 6th at about 5:41 p.m. Eastern Time. And I think we've done enough sermonizing for the week. I want to review the basics again, because then you'll understand what the sermonizing is all about and why it's necessary. So, and again, I'm going to be doing this. Sometimes you need to hear the same thing over and over dozens of times before it sinks in. That's how we are as human beings. I mean, like, remember as a kid, your parents might say, how many times do I have to tell you this? And you figure like, well, 36, 37, yeah, whatever, then I'll sink in. But all right, so let's first, I made an outline so I can present this in a reasonable order. Let us just start with what is happening, what we're experiencing. I mean, this is like, it's not new to you, but it's, we need to this is the first thing we need to consider. So basically, there's been a lot of loss of life, loss of health, the social distancing, the isolation, depression now, people are worried, about their future, school closings, closed down businesses. A lot of businesses have gone bankrupt, job losses. A lot of people just, there's over 1 million unemployment claims every week for 20 weeks now. People are, I don't know if people are being evicted yet. In New York State, not yet, but, some of these other states, lastly, if you want to put a number on it, the Congressional Budget Office predicted in May that once this is all done, it will have cost us $8 trillion. That's got to be a conservative estimate because that's before this surge that we're experiencing now. All right, so, this has taken a toll on us in so many ways. And naturally, we don't want this to ever happen again. And that's what this series is about. This series is about presenting a way to not, to give our children, our grandchildren, future generations this gift of a pandemic-free future. Some people who perhaps are pessimistic aren't accustomed to appreciating what we as humanity have done and can do. We'll tell you, well, that's not really all that possible. The epidemiologists, they'll say, well, it's not a matter of if we'll get another pandemic, it's a matter of when. And yes, under status quo scenario, business as usual, right? But, we don't have to keep doing things like we were doing in the past that brings us at risk for future pandemics. All right, so the second thing we need to understand is this pandemic is zoonotic, meaning it's transferred from animals to humans. And generally the way this works, it's transferred. Bats, are reservoirs. They carry a lot of these diseases. I don't know why. Rats do too sometimes, but basically the transmission of disease goes from the bat, who sometimes they just carry it. They don't get these diseases. They carry it, they infect, let's say, a chicken on a farm or a pig, and then this pig will get infected and infect human beings. It gets transmitted from wild animal to domestic animal to human being, and then we human beings infect each other. So that is, that's basically what we're dealing with. And so now there are two main risks that we need to protect against, that both come from animals in a way. The first one is naturally, we don't want to have any more pandemics like this, And the second is what people don't realize or don't fully appreciate is, and what some experts actually believe is a far greater risk, is that when we farm animals, especially in our factory farms all throughout the world, you know, they are in such unsanitary conditions, horrible conditions, and in many ways, but extremely unsanitary, that 80% of the antibiotics that we've developed to cure human diseases, so we can have an operation and then not be afraid of you know, of a bacterial infection or of a plague, because, you know, bacteria can cause plague pandemics also. 80% of these antibiotics are used in the farming of animals, in factory farming. So what's happening is that these bacteria are becoming antibacteria resistant. We've been using, for example, the same antibiotic for decades. All of a sudden we discover that it's working less and less. It's less and less effective. And this is because the more we use the antibiotics, the more of an opportunity these bacteria have to mutate and to develop defenses against, you know, our antibiotics. All right, so those are the two main risks: pandemics, both from viruses and bacteria, and then you have this additional bacterial superbugs, they call them, these bacteria that have developed resistance, and once we get them, you know, we have no defense against them. Okay, so those are the risks. Okay, now answers. Potential answer, especially for the viruses, is that we're working on a vaccine for this coronavirus. Now, what happens with a lot of, the standard procedure is, well, you get an outbreak or an epidemic or pandemic, and then the researchers go to work at trying to find a vaccine for this. And let me, you know, keep in mind, it's not always possible. For example, AIDS has been around for the 80s. There's still no vaccine for AIDS. Okay, so the fastest vaccine has ever been developed was in response to the 1957 influenza, I believe, here in the United States. Must have been across the world, but that took about 4 years to develop. And the average time to develop a vaccine is between 10, I don't know, 15, 20 years, who knows? But it's more than 10 years. And fine, we're fast tracking this. We've and this is great. You know, we've recognized the seriousness of our situation, and we've pumped a lot, essentially more money into the research. You know, these researchers, these young kids, they're very bright, very brilliant, many of them, but they'll follow the money, you know, and well, that's how we raise them. You know, they just, you know, the pharmaceuticals give them like tons of money, and then they may be working on something of far less importance. So basically we're now, and I think they see it also, you know, we see that we need to devote, so like there's about, I think there's 90 different companies working on a universal vaccine, the key is to have a vaccine that works against a coronavirus, an influenza virus, you know, all of them, or we may have to have a few because influenza is a bit different than corona and, you know, a few of the others, but to have that resistance. All right. The problem with this, again, that at the current rate of funding, they probably won't be available. This universal vaccine probably won't be available for at least 10 years. This is not my opinion. This is a podcast that Anthony Fauci was on that I listened to yesterday, the day before, and he makes the point, you know, we're looking at least 10 years, and he recorded the podcast in last November. And that may be very optimistic. So the first point of this, and it's not really the intent of this series, but when I began to get much more acquainted with the information that we have, I realized it has to be included. So like the first message of this is that we need to spend a lot more money on universal vaccines. So, you know, I'm thinking ordinarily, I mean, I'm guessing there's maybe like $5 billion spent on this, probably not too much. I see some of the numbers, like the National Institutes of Health just gave this company a grant, but it was only what, like 350 million, which is a lot of money, but compared to, so anyway, so like the first message of this is like, we should probably spend, you know, $50 billion on researching these universal vaccines. And I'm not really sure. I've got to do more research. These universal vaccines work against bacteria, viral infections. I've got to research whether they're also working on one for bacterial infections. You know, so it covers both threats. So instead of having antibiotics, all of a sudden we become, well, actually that's so much more difficult because we have a lot of positive bacteria in our body all the time, in our gut. You know, we have more bacteria in our body than we have human cells. So, all right, I'm not sure how possible that is. All right, so that's the third point. We need to invest $50 billion, probably $100 billion, you know, like for these universal vaccines. The fourth point, you know, sometimes you hear newscasters, politicians extremely mistakenly say that this is a 1 in 100 year event. No, I mean, they're comparing it to the 1918 flu that killed, yeah, between 50 and 100 million people. But we've had pandemics, you know, the AIDS, you know, we discovered it in the 80s. It's killed over 20 million people. We've had, you know, especially in the 2000s, you know, SARS, MERS, Ebola, you know, Zika. You know, the problem is that because of our, let's say, increased transportation, we're flying 4 billion passenger airline flights every year. Factory farms are everywhere, whereas in 1918, there were very few. So we were at a lot more risk for these pandemics than we were 50 years ago or 100 years ago. So it's not accurate to say this is a 1 in 100 year event. Again, they're happening, pandemics are happening with increasing frequency. So, all right, here's the main message of the show. We need to end factory farming, period. We can't, you know, if we don't do this, then we're going to be waiting 10, 15, 20 years for this universal vaccine for a virus, and then we could be hit with a bacterial infection or something. In other words, we're going to be living in dread for a decade or two, and we may not be that lucky, because again, these outbreaks are increasing in frequency. All right, so basically, yeah, unless we completely end factory farming, it's quite probable that we will experience another pandemic before these vaccines are available. Okay, that's the key message that I'm, you know, delivering, the key warning, the key, you know, point of information. And yeah, and like, you know, people have to realize this COVID-19 is a relatively mild virus. You know, there have been some viruses, I believe we had a swine flu pandemic in 2009. Many people don't hear about it because people don't talk about this that much, but it was, it killed about, I believe, 60% of the people that it infected. You know, we were, right now, coronavirus is killing maybe 1%, 2%. So these things can get a lot worse. Okay. So, all right. Actually, maybe this is the, I've got a few key points. The next key point is that, you know, I mean, think it through. I mean, like, you know, add 1 and 1. We either go vegan, you know, end farming. We have to end farming, you know. I mean, that's not an option. We end both factory farming and family farming, because, for example, the 1918 influenza, again, killed 50 to 100 million people. They believe originated in a family farm. There were very few, if any, factory farms back then. So we've got to end the farming of animals. But, that doesn't mean we have to end the eating of meat, dairy, eggs, fish, because fortunately, in 2013, just 7 years ago, I don't think this is a coincidence. I think this is kind of like, we're being deprived, we're being uplifted from farming these animals because it's such a horrible business. We're being made better people, and we're not being made to sacrifice something we've gotten accustomed to. So 2013, the first proof of concept that this technology works. Mark Post, a researcher from the Netherlands, premiered the first hamburger patty completely grown in a lab, completely animal cruelty free. Okay, he did it to an international audience in London. And since then, there are about 40 or 50 startups racing to meet the challenges, because like that was hamburger. They're working on pork, they're working on seafood, on dairy, on eggs. They're working to be able to meet the research challenges to ultimately bring these products to supermarkets. Those first 3 hamburger patties, there were 3 of them. They were financed by Sergey Brin, one of the co-founders of Google, and each of them cost about $330,000. So, we want to bring the price down. I think now the price is they can make them for about $10 each, okay, which is an amazing, achievement already. But, we need to get lower than that. And again, there's a lot of different products. There's seafood, foie gras, beef, pork. So, so here's maybe this is the most important message. As with vaccines, right now, this new cellular agriculture industry, clean meat, cultured meat, cell-based meat, it has various names. It has maybe about $1.5 billion in funding invested in it over these last 7 years. And at this rate of investment, industry insiders, I've spoken to some of them, and they report this. They're candid with this. They predict that it may take 10 years or longer for these products to be in supermarkets, to any substantial number, where you can go there and just you get a hamburger or a chicken, whatever, And so let me backtrack, because you probably aren't familiar with this, and I'm not sure I'll be able to get through everything, but I've got about 9 more minutes. Basically, what they do is they take a cell, a biopsy, a group of cells from an animal in a completely painless way. They can, for example, take a feather of a chicken and do this. And then they take these cells and they put them in a medium, a growth medium, a food really, nutrients. And they trick the cell somehow, I'm not a biologist, to believe it's still in the animal. So, and somehow they manipulate it to just grow into whatever kind of meat we want. If we want, light meat, dark meat, if it's chicken, hamburger, whatever. So basically these cells multiply, and that's it. It's nothing more complicated like that. It doesn't involve genetic modification, and it has to be done in sterile environments. And that's very important, because that's what protects us. In other words, if we're shifting from farming animals, factory farms especially, to this lab-grown meat, fish, dairy, then we're basically removing the opportunity for these outbreaks to happen. A bat is not going to get into one of these labs, there are no animals to infect in there, so it's a completely sanitary process, and that's what's key. So anyway, so at the rate of research, rate of spending now, it may be 10 or years or longer. And again, we haven't been that lucky, with this pandemic. Do we really want to go another 10, 15 years just in dread of this next one? And this is after, who knows how long it'll take us to come out of this one. It may take a year or two. The New York Times podcast said we may be going in waves, opening and closing society back and forth 3-4 times. This may take 3-4 years. So the idea is that just like I suggested, we invest $50 billion in universal vaccines, we should absolutely invest $50 billion, not tomorrow, not next year, 3 years, but beginning, well, once Biden gets into office, because, Trump and the Republicans are just not going to do this, okay? So we immediately inject $50 billion into this research. And, just like we're fast tracking the vaccine for coronavirus, it ordinarily takes 10, 20 years. We may have one in a year because we're pumping so many resources. We can do the same thing for this new industry. Okay, we pump $50 billion into it, and we'll discover that, in 2-3 years, so many more researchers are working on the problems. So many more resources are devoted to the problem. They get the right equipment. They so much more interest, more people. And all of a sudden, instead of it taking 10, 15, 20 years for these products to be in supermarkets, to a great degree, we have them in 2 or 3 years. That's a realistic assessment. Again, just look at what we're doing with the vaccine. So that's the point. So $50 billion now, people might say, oh, that's so much money, but is it really? Again, remember the Congressional Budget Office estimated in May that this coronavirus is going to cost us $8 trillion. So what is $50 billion as a percentage of that? It's 1/2 of 1%. By comparison, the average homeowner, let's say a home costs, let's say $220. It's not around here in Westchester, but someplace where homes are cheaper, houses. And they will invest, $1,000 a year. For over 10 years, they'll invest $10,000 to insure that home against theft, fire, damages. And so that investment to protect the home, and we all know that homes generally don't get lost to fire and theft and all that. This is like buying peace of mind. So, homeowners spend about 7% of the cost of their, 4.5%, I'm sorry, 4.5% of the cost of their home in homeowners insurance for something that very likely is not going to happen. So we're just like, again, 50%, $50 billion is 1/2 of 1%, 7 times less than the average homeowner spends to insure their home against something that hardly, that's really, again, it's a peace of mind investment. So, all right. So now let's put things together. Having already spent $4 trillion on the coronavirus and expecting to spend another 4, probably at least, again, because there have been surges, it would be the height of folly, of irresponsibility, of corruption for our politicians to not invest this money. Tax the super rich if you need to. It's not like we don't have the money. We're living in an age of there's more income inequality now than there was during the Great Depression. It's really not good, not right. So that's what we need to do. We need to invest this money again, not in 2 years or 3 years. We want to invest it now, starting in January. So let's, I've only got about 3.5 minutes left. Let's go a bit into the religion. This is probably punishment from God. I mean, the way we treat those animals are so horrible. Just one example. And I think I'm going to devote one show there's a book that I have, a Kindle book, that just has so many examples. Egg-laying hens, they're cramped in cages, sometimes 4, 5, 6 at a time in a small cage. The cage is so small that none of the birds have enough room to spread their wings, and they spend a year there. These cages are stacked on top of each other, so the chickens in the top cages are defecating, urinating on the chickens in the bottom cages. And that's one reason why they're pumped full of antibiotics, because the conditions are so unsanitary, so conducive to pandemic. So again, I'm thinking this is probably, what we're going through is a punishment from God. Just like, God at a certain point said, hey, enough with slavery, and I guess we were punished with the Civil War, but that's what it took. And we ended slavery. So now it's time to abolish these factory farms where we're actually deserving, if you think about it this way, this punishment, because our considering how much, especially we in the rich countries have, how many blessings we have, that we're treating these animals like this is beyond horrible. We can't call ourselves good people and still be doing this. All right, so, all right, we got through it. And again, I will continue to deliver this message over and over. The thing is, yes, until you get it. Now, when will we know when you get it? Well, when the politicians start talking about it and when the funds are released, that's when I'll know that the message has gotten through. So your job in this is to talk about it. And if you don't believe some of what I'm saying, it's all on the internet. So just Google it. There's a lot of videos. Look at the work. Anthony Fauci. If you Google Anthony Fauci's name, he appears on a lot of videos. You can have it, this stuff straight from the authorities. Okay, but once you're convinced that what I'm saying is true, talk about it. Talk about it with your friends, your family, your coworkers. If you have contacts with Congress people, with politicians, let them know about it. Chances are they don't know about it. This is a brand new field, and politicians are just they're so invested in re-election and all that they're just not up on so much that we need to thrive in our future. That's just the nature of politics now. So we have to make them aware of that. All right, we've got about 30 seconds left. All right, watch this every Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. on White Plains Community Media, channel 76 if you get Optimum, 45 if you get Verizon, and the episodes are also on YouTube. So again, starting on Sunday, I'm not sure whether I'm going to go back to sermonizing. Hopefully, maybe I'll have some new information. I'm still reading a lot about pandemics and all. So have a great weekend, and I will see you in a few days. Thanks.